as I want to go through the theme that we had at SEP Tahoe, first of all, thank you for making it possible. Thank you for your prayers, because are the churches that made it possible, God who opened up the door and we were able to walk through that. It is indeed quite an experience. I told my wife, because we had kids from 8 years of age to 18 years of age, both boys and girls, and it's a different generation than your generation and our generation. And we'll end up our day today visiting a 90-year-old woman who's in her last days of life, and I think there's a point in the sermon that I want to mention about her as well. But I was telling my wife that I've never been bossed around by so many little girls and little boys in my whole life. As you try to help them to see and to comprehend and to enjoy life from a God perspective. Kids are different, and it's like, you want them to line up, and it's like herding cats. Or I have this other idea, metaphor. It's like trying to carry an armload of marbles. If you can imagine, like this, and they're just all over the place all the time. But there was a real valid lesson in all of that. It isn't about me. It isn't about the counselors. It is about what God is doing, and we have to step up to the plate, and it isn't easy to be gracious. It isn't easy to be loving. It isn't easy to be kind when kids are kind of smarting off and not. You're hoping to try to help them. It's kind of like I was, and you'll have to fill in the blank on this one, I was teaching basketball, and so I decided that the part of this for this particular senior group of boys that I had was that there would be a shoot-off on free throws, and whoever won the free throw shooting contest would then take me on. And so I heard the kid behind us beginning to laugh, and he says, "Why, we can beat this old..." And that's what he said. And I laughed. I was laughing inside of myself because it was a setup. I can shoot free throws as an old man because I don't have to move a whole lot, one. Number two, I knew the rim was slanted, which they knew as well, but I had practiced. Number three, it was very springy and bouncy. I mean, unless you just got nothing but net, you weren't going to make the free throw. By the way, I'm going back next year as the free throw shooting champ. So, anyhow, it was about all that. But I think it was a God thing, kind of like, to allow that to happen. And then I think about my wife, Karen, who was in Lake Tahoe, like up to 3 hours a time. If you know how cold Lake Tahoe is, 3 hours, she comes out shivering, and did that like for 3 or 4 days that she was doing these things. And you're doing these things for the kids, and you're hoping. But the theme of SEP Tahoe, again, was being rooted. We had T-shirts and all that. This comes from Ephesians chapter 3, verses 16 through 19. And I want to share it because I believe that what we see here helps us in our walk of life. It also gives me a visual to help me in dealing with young people as well. But in verse 16 of Ephesians chapter 3, we read that our responsibility in our life is pray that out of the glorious riches he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the saints to grasp how wide, how long, how high and deep the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. So that is the theme. Now, in getting this visual, I want to give you a visual that might help you to understand. This is written by the Apostle Paul. And the Apostle Paul, who is a disciplinarian, in the sense that the Apostle Paul was quite a legalist. This is the way you do it. This is the way walking in it, or off with your kind of, you're going to pay the price. You also have to realize that the Apostle Paul, because of all the things that he had been through, was kind of an old toot. Don't put it that way. And he had been beaten. He had been stoned. He had been through all those kind of things. And you just got to imagine him kind of gnarly. But what is he talking about? And to whom is he talking? He is talking to a church. He is talking to the church at Ephesus. And the Ephesus was the San Francisco of that kind of society. They had a lot of things going on in Ephesus. There was a lot of sin. Like one kid asked me, sin, what's that? Had no idea of what sin was. And so when we look at these things, we have to understand the heart that the Apostle Paul had toward God and toward the children, that is, the people, he calls them saints there. So the focus as counselors at SCP Tahoe was the application of God's love. Now, we had to come back home and debrief every evening. It's like, oh my, how would you have handled this? How would I have handled that? And the interesting thing, when we came back in the evening and we're tired, we're worn out, our approach was a lot harsher than it was the next morning when we got up and said, no, we thought through this. This isn't about us. This is about showing the grace of God, the joy that is set before us, that we would endure this cross. Nothing like Christ, but it's still the same principle involved in it. Now, it wasn't all bad. There were lots and lots of good things. But the bottom line is we had kids from all over, doing their own things from all age groups, and then trying to get them to work together with one another. So it was a challenge for it. It was a challenge for us in terms of application and our accepting of what we need to do, because again, many of the dorm parents, as Karen and I were dorm parents as well as instructors, because we did a lot of different things there. And then the challenge of diversity, both in gender, age, race, understanding, as I say, from those who are praising God, young people, which is astounding to see young people who just have a love for God, and then on the other hand, people who just have not had the opportunity to know God. It hasn't really been given to them, and if they know God, not a God of love. And this is what we're trying to teach them. So it is a challenge. So it's about planting seed in a fertile, and it's really like that. Some ground was very fertile. Some ground was very shallow. Some ground was very rocky. Those are the grounds, but it's like, how do you treat them? How do you love them? How do you help them to love them? And talking with one of the young, it was like, well, what is it you want to enjoy? What is it? What's your prayer? I'm not going to pray. I'm not praying. And I say, well, that's okay. Do you mind if I pray for you? Do you mind if I pray that you have fun? You find some enjoyment, that it's, helpful to you. So anyway, it was a challenge. Now, what I want us to look at and understand, because all of us, I think all of us, being older people, we've gone through a different kind of society. Oftentimes when we're told to jump, we ask how high. In my case, it was as I was in the air, asking how high, because when it said jump, it was immediate. It wasn't like, if my parents said carry out the trash, it didn't mean 10 minutes from now. It meant now. It didn't make any difference what I was doing. It was in the moment. And so we have to realize and come to understand that God has a different approach. And God is not a legalistic God. So when we look at God from the beginning, and this is what's important for us to understand, because we're talking about how high, how deep, how wide is the love of God. We have to understand that God, from the beginning of our human existence, was love. And how did He demonstrate it in the beginning?
Feeling the blues today, or tired of life already? Do you have questions about life, or need spiritual advice? The Worldwide Church of God is located in Fairfield, Santa Rosa, and Modesto, California. We welcome everyone to attend our worship services with us every week at the times listed on your screen.